For your second activity this week, you're taking one of your body paragraphs. That is, the paragraphs where you're doing your actual analysis or close reading. And we're going to revise that one paragraph, because once you get it down in one paragraph, you can take that same process and go through all the others. So, begins with structure. Body paragraphs should always open with a topic sentence. The topic sentence should go back to the thesis, back to the main argument. It should also relate to, or really sum up, the argument of the paragraph. So this is not, in some ways, not just about that analysis, but relating that analysis to an entire flow, an entire coherent argument, going back to the thesis and then to the argument within the paragraph. Then should have evidence. This should primarily be paraphrase or summary from your text. Quotes only when absolutely necessary. So primarily summary, just like from your summary paper, except instead of an entire paragraph of that, you're going to get one sentence, maybe two. And then finally, analysis. What is significant or meaningful about this evidence you've just given the reader? That should be about 3 or 4 sentences. That should be the bulk of the paper, is your analysis or your close reading, because it is, in fact, a close reading paper. To highlight this difference, let's look at the difference between summary and close reading. And remember, you all have been doing close reading every week in your discussion boards. In fact, if you go back and you look, oh, this is great close reading. This is the kind of thing you want to do in your final paper. But it's one thing to do it in a response. It's another thing, in my experience, to do it in a paper. Because a lot of students who are great at close reading are not confident in that skill. And so when they get to the paper, they want to go back to summary rather than letting that analysis, letting that close reading out the way they do in their discussion boards. So to start with, be confident. You know how to do this. You've been doing this for 7 weeks. You've got this. And now let's see what it would look like. So this is a strong summary. It opens with a paragraph that sums up the scope of the novel, this cursed hero, Huron, and then it goes into a body paragraph that summarizes the narrative. Notice all the citations. This is what is happening in this novel. Now let's look at an analysis of that same text. So notice, first of all, it opens with an idea, not with the action. So the idea is this association of light with good and darkness with evil. And the way that light and darkness is then moved onto the use of language. Because remember, Tolkien was a linguist, and that his guttural language in this text is associated with darkness and evil. And the vocal languages are associated with light and what is admirable. And so in this fantasy world, the way language sounds is actually concretely tied to the meaning of the words or the role of the characters. So with that thesis in mind, first of all, is that a creative thesis? Yes, very creative, and it's very different from summary, because summary is what has happened. This is how is meaning being created in the midst of what is happening. See the difference? Okay, so now we get a thesis, we have an argument. Can we hold it up? Let's look at a body paragraph. It begins with this reference to the vocal language of Tolkien, which focuses on vowels. So it's defining what vocal languages mean, and it's tied to the positive. Is that relate to the thesis? Yes. And now, does it relate to the rest of the paragraph? Well, let's read through. Tolkien is talking about this elf teaching Turin to speak, and the language that he's using is richer and beautiful, and these interactions are positive for the character Turin. The word lightened, which is here in quotations because it's actually being used by Tolkien, and the analysis needs the specific language to make the argument, carries the connotations of moral light. So the light and sound of the language relates back to this idea of moral lightness or moral goodness. And this is repeated or emphasized by the way it's contrasted with these other influences around Huron at the time that he's learning this dialect of Elvish. So, how does this break down? Topic sentence, vocal language tied to positive, that relates directly to the thesis and to the entire message of the paragraph, which is all about vocal languages ties to positive. The evidence. The evidence is here where it's describing the action in the story. This scene where Nalas is teaching Tierin to speak. And the analysis is at the end, and it's the bulk of the paragraph, where it's talking about connotations of words. That is, not just what is said, but what kind of meaning, what kind of ideas are tied to the term that's being used here, beyond just the definition. And then how this is building. Okay, this is being emphasized in all of these ways, and it leads to this dramatic situation, which is all tied to the role of language in the life of this character Huron. This is not at all about or summarizing what is said. This is all going towards meaning, proving that this interaction is tied to the idea of lightness and moral goodness. That's the difference of summary and analysis, and the difference between an analysis paper and a summary paper. It's not about what is happening. It's about why do we care? What does it mean? How is it sending a message that is beyond the obvious? Now that you have that, come back to this paragraph and see if your own paragraphs are doing that. And then if body paragraph of one of your peers is doing the same.